You know that feeling when you're just completely swamped by your to-do list? It almost feels like you're spending more time just planning your work than, actually doing it. Well, it turns out even supercomputers have this exact same problem. So let's dive into this, because the way machines figured out how to solve their time management issues, well, it can teach us a surprising amount about how to manage our own.
Okay, picture this. It's the summer of '97. NASA has just pulled off this incredible feat. They've landed the Pathfinder on Mars. It's sending back these amazing, world-changing images. And then, just a few days into the mission, nothing. Complete radio silence. You can just imagine the panic back at Mission Control.
I mean, what happened? Did it crash? Did some crucial part just break, hundreds of millions of miles away from any help? What could possibly have gone wrong?
The answer is, well, it's almost hard to believe. That multi-million-dollar Mars rover. It wasn't broken. For all intents and purposes, it was procrastinating. Yeah, a bug in its scheduling software was making it super busy with all these tiny, low-priority tasks, while completely ignoring its single most important job, talking to Earth.
So the Pathfinder's problem was a total failure of prioritization. It just couldn't figure out what was most important at that moment. And honestly, that should make us all feel a little better. I mean, if a state-of-the-art machine can get stuck in the weeds like that, it's okay that we do too. In fact, that exact struggle is what leads us to our first big lesson from the world of computer science.
So, lesson number 1. It comes from a trap that I think we all fall into, this obsession with creating the absolute 100% perfect to-do list. And here is the fundamental problem with that. Every single minute you spend rereading your emails, shuffling your tasks around, trying to figure out the perfect thing to do next, that's a minute you're not actually making any progress. It feels really productive, right? But a lot of the time, it's just a very clever way to delay starting.
In computer science, this whole mess has a name. They call it a quadratic time algorithm. Now, that sounds super technical, but the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. All it means is that a small increase in the number of things you have to do leads to a huge increase in the effort it takes to sort them. It's not a straight line. It's more like a runaway train of work.
And you can see just how this plays out in real life right here. Look at your inbox. Sorting through 10 emails to find the most important one takes some effort, right? We'll call that 1 unit of effort. But if you wake up to 20 emails, it's not twice the work to sort. No, it's 4 times the work. And 30 emails? That's 9 times the work. You get buried exponentially.
And this is not just some theory. Back in 2003, the programmers who were building the Linux operating system, they hit this exact same wall. Their system had become so obsessed with trying to perfectly rank every single task in order of importance that it was spending more time ranking the work than actually doing the work.
So what they did about it was absolutely brilliant and totally counterintuitive. They just gave up on the idea of a single perfectly ranked list. Instead, they created a few super simple priority buckets. Think high, medium, and low. That's it. Was it less precise? Yeah, for sure. But it was unbelievably faster.
And that just perfectly sums up the takeaway here, right? Chasing that perfect order can be the very thing that stops you from making any progress at all. Sometimes, just grabbing something from the high priority bucket and getting started is infinitely better than spending an hour trying to find the single most optimal task on your list.
Okay, so we've seen how trying to be too perfect can grind us to a halt before we even start. But what about when we finally do pick a task and dive in? Well, that brings us to our second huge insight from the world of computers, the hidden and honestly, the massive cost of interruptions.
In computing, whenever a processor has to stop one job to start another, it has to do something called a context switch. It's got to save all its progress, completely clear its working memory, and then load up all the new information for the new task. This isn't free. It costs time and it costs energy. Does that sound familiar? Because it's the exact same mental price we pay every time a notification yanks us out of deep work.
And this right here sets up a fundamental conflict we all live with.
Real productivity, getting meaningful stuff done, that requires minimizing those costly context switches. But being responsive, being available for your team, your boss, your family, that requires you to be ready to switch your context at a moment's notice. These two things are pulling in opposite directions.
So how do computers get around this? They don't just ignore everything. They use this really clever strategy to try and balance both of those demands.
It's a strategy called interrupt coalescing. Basically, instead of the processor stopping what it's doing for every single tiny little event, like a mouse movement or a key press, it groups them all together.
It'll just wait a fraction of a second, collect all the little interruptions that came in, and then deal with them in one quick, efficient batch.
And we can do this. We can apply this exact idea to our own lives. Instead of checking your email every single time a new one dings, just let them collect. Put them in a holding area. Then, maybe once an hour, or 3 times a day, you perform a context switch, but on your terms. You handle that whole batch of interruptions at once, and then you get right back to your focused work.
And hey, if you need proof that this actually works, just look at your laptop. Back in 2013, the widespread use of interrupt coalescing led to this huge leap in battery life for computers. We're not talking about a small tweak here. This was a total game changer.
And here's why it works so well. Constantly switching tasks keeps the processor running hot, in a high-power state. But by batching all those interruptions, the computer can handle them super fast and then immediately drop back into a low-power energy-saving mode. This is the computer equivalent of getting some real rest. So for computers, this whole approach lets them save energy and get way more done. And as you can probably guess, the exact same thing is true for us. So let's bring these lessons home and reboot our own systems.
So what have we really learned from the machines today? First, stop trying to create the perfect to-do list. Just use simple priority buckets and get started. Good enough is so much better than perfect. And second, protect your focus. Batch your interruptions. Handle all those emails and messages on a set schedule, not whenever they demand your attention. The end goal in all of this is to reclaim your attention and find that human version of a low-power state, genuine, honest-to-goodness rest.
When you really think about it, our attention is our most precious, finite resource. It's our personal battery. And constant context switching just drains it dry, while focused, uninterrupted work and deliberate rest are what recharge it. So the real question to leave you with is this: how are you going to use these lessons to manage your own internal system and recharge?